Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. I bid to Dr. Muhammad Sofian and my fellow classmates. We are from Group 4. We'll be presenting about the numerical memory task experiment that we have conducted. Our group consists of me, Ifa, Haza, Anis, and Hanim. Performing mental arithmetics, remembering numbers, and understanding instruction or conversations are the examples of immediate memory on daily basis. The mechanism behind this is explained by these two proposed theories, which are the short-term memory and working memory. Both model retains information momentarily into a limited capacity system. What differs them from each other is that short-term memory merely retains information with a little processing, while working memory process and manipulate information. Other than that, short-term memory is a unitary system, that is, all information are stored in a single system. However, working memory is a multi-component system. Different types of information are stored in their respective subsystems. For example, visual and spatial information are stored in the visuospatial sketchpad, while spoken and written information are stored in the phonological loop. Magic number 7 was a notion suggested by Miller that refers to the capacity of short-term memory. On average, adults can store about 5 to 9 items in their short-term memory. Digit span task is used to assess working memory capacity and attention by asking participants to recall the sequence of numbers presented. It is used in neuropsychological examinations and IQ testing instruments. Our experiment employed similar format to digit span tasks to compare individuals' short-term memory for digits presented in auditory and visual format. In our experiment, the independent variable was the numerical values presented to the research participant, which is in the format of visual and auditory stimulus. And the dependent variable was the length of the digit sequence recalled.
Next, I was saying about the problem statement of this study is that to test whether the length of digit sequence recalled by Unimas Year 3 Psychology and their graduates using visual and auditory stimulus are significantly different or not.
Next, I will present for the definition. So, first is digit sequence. Based on the Collins Dictionary, sequence can be defined as a particular order in which things happen or arrange. Meanwhile, digit can be defined as a written symbol for any 10 number from 0 to 9. So, digit sequence are the number that range from 0 to 9 that are arranged in order. So next is recall. So according to the American Psychological Association, recall can be defined as the transfer of pure learning or past experience to the current consciousness. Meanwhile, for Malik and Amin, recall or retrieve is the reaccess of the retained event and information in mind in response to the external stimulus. It is one of the fundamental memory processes along with encoding and retention, and recall is being used to measure the memory performance. This is because it is common to distinguish memory that are available but not accessible and the material which is on the tip of the tongue but cannot be brought to the mind. So next is the auditory stimulus. According to the American Psychological Association, auditory stimulus can be defined as a stimulus that is capable of eliciting an auditory sensation. Meanwhile, Legal stated that auditory stimulus elicit a complex series of electrical signals in the ear and the nervous system, which can use for hearing assessments, audiologic and neurological diagnosis, and the neurophysiological research. So the information from the auditory stimulus will be stored in the ultra short-term memory, which we call the echoic memory, which can last for 2 to 4 seconds. For the visual stimulus, it can be defined as a stimulus that normally informs a picture or color that shows on the screen, visually being used to evoke a visual evoke potential. So it can vary in terms of size, color, content, and luminosity. So when the visual stimulus disappears, the visual short-term memory help us to actively maintain the information from the visual stimulus that we keep in our mind for a brief period of time. So different individual have different period of time they can keep in mind, which depend on the person memory capacity and ability. So for the hypothesis, the null hypothesis is there is no significant difference between the length of the digit sequence recalled by the participant with auditory and visual stimulus. Meanwhile, the alternative hypothesis, there is significant difference between the length of the digit sequence recalled by the participant with auditory and visual stimulus.
The instruments and apparatus used in our experiment were desktop or laptop with speaker or headphones, access to the numerical memory task experiment in the OPL, and a statistics software to analyze data collected. So for the experiment design, we use within subjects design since all participants were tested with both audio and visual stimuli. Our experiment participants were 15 students from Year 3 Psychology undergraduates. Our sampling method was convenience sampling, and the analysis method used was independent t-test.
We move on to the procedures of this experiment. The first step is that participants were instructed to go to the FA Online Psychology Lab using the link provided and log in into their respective account. The second step, participants were asked to click on the experiment columns on the left side of the screen and choose numerical memory experiment that is under connection. Upon clicking the numerical memory experiment, a prompt appeared and participants were instructed to put the class ID, which was 331854, to launch the experiment. Fourth step is that the experiment then introduced participants with a description of the study, and I quote, "In the numerical memory study, participants will be asked to recall a series of numbers that will be presented either in a visual or auditory format. This study compares participants' short-term memory for numbers presented in an auditory versus a visual format. From here, participants can get the idea of what and how are they going to be observed with." By clicking Start, participants then were given a sound check and audio test using their left and right audio speaker. In the sixth step, the participants were introduced with a demonstration of the sequence and later were given a practice session where they were given 2 tests using a voice and a series of numbers. After the practice session were given, now the participants are welcome and prepared to begin the real experiment. Experiment then started by visual stimuli first, then proceeded with audio stimuli. And the last step of the procedures is that after finishing the experiment, participants were instructed to save the data and the data later observed by the researchers.
Thank you, Eva. Now I will explain about the result. This is the descriptive statistics. For the gender, there were 4 males and 11 female students that volunteered to do this numerical memory experiment. As for mode, we can see that female students dominated this experiment with the 73%, while male only 26.7%. For the age variable was detected in 4 categories. The mode for the age was 21 years old, which had 9 participants, with 60% involved. Meanwhile, 23 and 24 years old only have 1 representative each. The remaining 4 participants were 22 years old. Overall, our participants' age range was 21 to 24 years old. This table shows the mean and standard deviation of the digit recall for numerical stimuli presented in an auditory and visual format. Both mean value for the stimulus is 7 after rounding up. However, it only shows 0.07 difference between the mean of auditory and visual stimulus. The second table, the below one, it is the overall mean of digit recall for numerical stimuli presented in an auditory and visual for each participant is 7 after rounding up, and the standard deviation is 2.314. From this inferential statistic, Lewis and independent test, p-value is 0.073, which is larger than 0.05. That means we fail to reject the null hypothesis of Levin's test. Hence, variances are equal. And the independent t-test p-value is 0.957, is larger than 0.05. That is enough evidence to fail to reject null hypothesis. In overall, the result shows that there is no significant difference between the length of the digit sequence recalled for auditory and visual stimulus. Thank you.
So moving on to the discussion, based on the result, it is found that there is no significant difference between the length of digit sequence recall for auditory and visual stimulus. So this result actually supports the finding by Godzilla and Whitehead in 1975 on a study of effects of auditory and visual modalities in recall of words, where it is found that there is no significant difference between recall of stimulus words for auditory and printed words, which is the visual stimulus. Besides, this result also support the finding of Pearson and Wilbix in 2021 on the study of effects of audiovisual memory cues on working memory recall, where it is found that there is no significant difference between the visual, auditory, and audiovisual modality on recall. However, this finding actually contradicts the multi-store model of memory by Atkinson and Shiffrin. So this is because, according to the model, auditory sensory memory can actually last up to 4 seconds compared to visual sensory memory, which can only last between 1/4 to 1/2 of a second, which indicates that recall should be easier and faster for auditory stimulus. And this implies that the length of digit sequence recall for auditory stimulus should be higher than visual stimulus. And this also implies that there should be a significant difference between the length of digit sequence recall for auditory and visual stimulus. Nevertheless, the results show that there is no significant difference between the length of digit sequence recall for auditory and visual stimulus. Hence, we assume a few factors that may have influenced the experiment and influenced the result. So the first factor is the uncontrollable environment of the experiment. So since this experiment is conducted fully online, the participants participated in this experiment at their own home and places. So this situation has made participants more prone to the exposure of extraneous variables such as noise and disruption, and this may have influenced the result of the experiment. The second one is the small sample size. So this may influence the experiment, as the smaller the sample size, the higher the confidence interval, which made it harder to detect differences and lessen the precision of the result. Therefore, we recommend for future research to conduct the experiment in a more controlled environment and increase the sample size. In conclusion, this experiment found that there is no significant difference between the length of digit sequence recall for auditory and visual stimulus. More research needs to be done in the future regarding this matter to validate whether there is a significant difference between the length of digit sequence recall for auditory and visual stimulus or not. So that is all from us. Thank you.